Hello everyone. Today, or this week, we are doing the topic of hormones and how are they used for coordinating animal responses. Our intended learning outcomes for this are to understand how hormones regulate animal responses, to be aware of the range of different kinds of hormones. There's quite a fascinating range of different ones, to familiarize with how hormones are involved in stress responses, and to consider how reproduction is regulated by hormones. So first of all, what is a hormone? It's a chemical messenger produced by endocrine glands. These are glands like the pituitary, thyroid and adrenal glands, and they travel through the bloodstream to regulate vital bodily functions, including metabolism, growth, reproduction and mood. So you have a secreting cell which produces this chemical, and it goes within the body, and in order to be affected by the hormone, the target cell needs to have a receptor for it, so in order to be able to detect that the hormone is there. If there's a cell without any receptors, then it won't be targeted by that hormone. So key points to note: they're produced by endocrine glands. They're signaling chemicals that travel in the bloodstream, and they have effects on target cells. The definition of a hormone, it comes from the Greek word hormone, meaning setting in motion, and it is setting things in motion in various bodily functions. So we have these signaling molecules. They're produced by ductless endocrine glands in multicellular organisms. They're transported by the circulatory system. So I already said bloodstream. That's for vertebrates in the blood, but in invertebrates, then they would be transported in the hemolymph, and they target distant organs to regulate physiology and behavior. They have diverse chemical structures, mainly in three classes. So you have eicosanoids, which come from oxidation of arachidonic acid or other PUFAs. We have steroids, and we have amino acid or protein derivatives. So now we know a bit about what hormone is. Then we can consider about the endocrine system, which is the whole system of hormones. So this has the endocrine glands that produce the hormones, and then these hormones, they're chemical messengers are released into the bloodstream, and they exert their effects nearby or at a distance. So it could be only a few cells away, or could be right at the other end of the body. So some of them they'll travel quite some distance within this endocrine system to have their effect. And the requirement to be sensitive to hormone it's not how close it is to where it's produced. It's being able to have a receptor for it. If it has a receptor for it, then it'll get activated. Endocrine glands, they're different from exocrine glands. So I'm not going to dwell on exocrine glands, but those release secretions via a duct. For example, salivary glands, and so they're producing substances which go outside of the body. And there's a whole different topic of actually pheromones, which are quite important in some organisms such as insects, but that's a whole different topic. And today we're considering the chemical signals operating within the body. So it's actually signaling within the organism. There's some of these other chemicals which are excreted or secreted from exocrine glands. These can have effects on other organisms, but that's not the topic for today. Today we're talking about hormones, and the hormones, they can be proteins, they can be peptides, they can be steroids, and they can also be stimulated by another hormone. So you have this feature called cascades, where the release of one causes the release of another, and you get a whole sort of signaling cascade of them. And or sometimes they can get triggered by an electrical impulse. All of these things that are triggering them, they're relating to external environment or conditions within the body. So it's picking up warning signals or various features indicating different things that are going on that could affect the ability of the organism to survive and reproduce. So it's adapting the body according to what's going on in the environments in which the organism finds itself, and according to the conditions. Okay, so next up, we're going to go through all these various different types of hormones. For this, we're going to focus on humans as an example, and we're going to go as a mammal, and we're going to go through all the various different types of main types of hormones which exist. And to start off with, then we're going to look at the places where these hormones are made within the body. So they are produced by the endocrine glands, as we've already discussed, and there's various different types of endocrine glands that are located at different positions within the body. So these hormones, they're also grouped according to the chemical classes. So first we've got proteins and polypeptides, and these are produced in the anterior pituitary gland, and the hormones there are quite a lot of them, affecting growth and some other functions related to reproduction. So on the next slide we're going to go into more detail on that. Then we've got the posterior pituitary hormones that also related to hypothalamus, and we've got ADH and oxytocin there. I'm going to tell you more about the functions of these in the next slide, but this is just to give you an overview of what is produced where. Then we've got pancreas, which is producing insulin and glucagon, and those are also within this first group. And then finally there's the parathyroid gland, which is producing parathyroid hormone. Secondly, we've got steroid hormones, and these are produced in the adrenal cortex, in the ovaries and placenta, and in the testes that are making testosterone. Got the ovaries and placenta, which are making estrogen and progesterone. So these are some sex hormones which we've got there. And then in the third group, there's derivatives of amino acid tyrosine. So in the thyroid gland, there's thyroxine and triiodothyronine, and in the adrenal gland, there's adrenaline and noradrenaline. These are the amino acid derivative types of hormones. So starting off with the anterior pituitary, if you look in the previous slide, you can see where that is. It's located just below the brain, and then we have a whole range of different hormones which are affecting growth, metabolism, and some relating to reproduction as well. So these hormones are water soluble. These protein and polypeptide hormones, and they act via membrane receptors. They generally act. They're relatively fast acting for hormones. And we have the growth hormone, which stimulating growth of in the organism. Then we have prolactin, which is stimulating milk production in mammals, modulating parental behavior, and it also has some immune and metabolic roles in many vertebrates. Next up, ACTH this adrenocorticotrophic hormone that stimulates the adrenal cortex to release cortisol. That's part of the HPA stress axis. And so this is some part of the stress response, which we're going to consider in more detail later on. And it links perceived stress to metabolic and physiological responses. Then we have the thyroid stimulating hormone. Function of this is to regulate basal metabolic rate, and it stimulates the thyroid gland to release these two other hormones in a bit of a cascade there with thyroxine and triiodothyronine. And finally, we've got a couple of sex-related hormones. So there's the follicle stimulating hormone. That's as a function of regulating gamete production. In females, it stimulates the estrogen synthesis and follicle development, and in the males, it stimulates the spermatogenesis. And finally, in the anterior pituitary gland, there's you can see a whole range of hormones being produced in this gland. There's the luteinizing hormone, and that is a function of activation of reproductive function. In females, it triggers ovulation and progesterone production, and in males, it stimulates testosterone production. There were so many of these protein and polypeptide hormones that I had to put them onto 2 slides. And now we have some more of them, but they're not in the anterior pituitary. They're now, the next 2 are in the posterior pituitary. So these are a bit different because they're synthesized in the hypothalamus, and then they're released from the posterior pituitary. So it's at the back and it's closer to the brain. There's 2 hormones here. So we have antidiuretic hormone, ADH, and that increases water reabsorption in the kidneys. So it helps regulate blood osmolarity and blood pressure. And the function of this is water balance and homeostasis in the body. And then there's oxytocin, and that stimulates uterine contractions during birth. It causes milk ejection during lactation, and it's involved in social bonding and affiliative behaviours. So this has functions in reproduction, particularly females, and social coordination. Now moving to the pancreas, and we have these hormones which are involved in sugar and energy storage and nutrient utilization. And so there's insulin, and this lowers blood glucose by promoting glucose uptake. It stimulates glycogen, lipid, and protein synthesis. So lowering the amount of sugar in the blood by locking it up into these other bigger molecules. And then there's glucagon, and that raises blood glucose via glycogen breakdown and gluconeogenesis. So it's releasing, mobilizing energy stores, and that function is it has the function for increasing energy availability during fasting or periods of shortage. And so it releases sugar. So these 2 hormones, they do the opposite thing. So one of them is releasing simple sugars, and the first one is the insulin is locking them up by making them into big molecules. Last in this group of hormone chemicals, we have parathyroid, and this has functions in calcium and phosphate homeostasis in the body. It raises blood calcium levels, stimulates bone reabsorption, and kidney calcium and vitamin D activation. The second group of hormone chemicals is the steroids, and these are a bit different because they're lipid soluble, and they target intracellular receptors, so they can go across the cell membrane because they're lipid soluble. and then they target receptors which are actually within inside the cell, and these are slower than the first group, but they have long-lasting effects. So let's go through this. I want you to have full understanding, so you can see all these different types, because I want to miss things out. I want to get all the main ones here. So bear with me as we go through this list. I just want to make sure that you guys can hear about all these different types of hormones. So steroid hormones. And now we're going to another gland. We've got the adrenal cortex, and that produces cortisol, and this is a central hormone of the stress response. It mobilizes energy. So if you need to run away or fight or something, it's getting energy ready for that. It suppresses immune and reproductive functions, and supports cardiovascular and metabolic stability. The function is to cope with prolonged stress and energetic demand. Also in the adrenal cortex, we have another hormone, that's aldosterone, and this increases sodium reabsorption and potassium excretion in the kidneys. The function of this is electrolyte balance and circulatory stability, so it's regulating blood volume and blood pressure. Now moving to the ovaries and placenta in females, we've got estrogens, and those involved in development of female reproductive tract, regulation of menstrual and estrous cycles, development of secondary sexual characteristics, and it also has effects on bone fat distribution and behavior. And the other female hormone, progesterone, which prepares and maintains the uterus for pregnancy, suppresses uterine contractions, supports gestation, and its main role is in pregnancy maintenance. Now going to males, we have the testes as the place where the hormone is being produced, and these are making testosterone. And this has roles for developments of male reproductive organs, secondary sexual characteristic development, and it promotes spermatogenesis, so making sperm. It influences mating, and it also is linked with aggressive behaviours, and the function is in male reproductive functions and behaviour. Okay, so this is a smaller group. You'll be pleased to know we're nearly there. So now we've got the tyrosine derived hormones. So these are based on an amino acid, which got some other more complicated chemical structure with that as a sort of building block. And we've got the thyroid gland, and that's producing thyroxine and triiodothyronine, and these hormones, they function in increasing basal metabolic rate, increased oxygen consumption and heat production, and they're essential for normal growth and nerve development. They've got functions in metabolic regulation and developmental coordination. And last up for this whole tour of the different hormones, we've got the adrenal gland, which is producing adrenaline. That increases the heart rate and blood pressure, mobilizes glucose and fatty acids, reproduces blood to the muscles, has function in rapid fight or flight response. So there's part of stress response, and then also there is noradrenaline, which has roles in vasoconstriction and blood pressure regulation, and it enhances alertness and arousal, has function of immediate stress and vigilance response. So these are ways in which the animals can adapt to dangerous situations, improve their chances of survival by being able to either run faster or fight harder. So now some couple of general points about how hormones function. So we've already considered how they're produced in a gland, they move in the blood, and then they arrive at a target cell which has got a receptor for it. I'm just going to look at a little bit more detail about what happens when the hormone. I do a lot of research on pheromones. Excuse me. When the hormone binds with the receptor, what happens there? And so the hormone, you can think of that as the first messenger, but then there's a bit of a signaling cascade going on in the cell there as well. So once the hormone binds to that specific receptor, so it needs to have the complementary sort of structure that will bind to that particular chemical. It's specific binding. It's got some molecular specificity there. And once it binds to that specific receptor, then an enzyme is activated, and that could be adenyl cyclase. So once that is activated, then it catalyzes the production of cyclic AMP from ATP. So it's important for energy in the cell, and that leads to a cascade of events inside the cell that cause the desired effect, the required effect. For example, glycogen breakdown into glucose if you've got the hormone which is doing that. General features of hormones. These are organic chemical compounds. Organic means they've got carbon in them. They're produced and released by endocrine and neuroendocrine neurosecretory cells. So that's a specialist one which got some links with the nervous system. And they exert regulatory effects. I think that's very apparent now after we've done our tour of what effects they're having. They're regulating various things within the body. They're blood-borne invertebrates, so they're carried in the blood, and they can be effective at very low concentrations as well because they're signaling molecules. So you don't need a lot of it; it's just enough of it to be detected. So this next section of our talk today, we've got the foundations of hormonal coordination. With hormones as chemical messengers in animals. So the hormones, they're produced by the endocrine glands, released into the bloodstream or extracellular fluid, and then they reach target tissues. So these chemical messengers, they traveling in the blood. There's specificity through the receptors. So it'll only bind to specific receptors on or inside the target cells, and that ensures precise effects. Although they're moving around all over the body in the bloodstream, the cells which haven't got receptors for them will be blissfully unaware of it. They won't know that that's going on. They only get detected by the cells which have got the receptor for it, and so it needs to have some chemical complementarity to it. So the two will sort of bind together. There'll be a chemical binding pocket on the receptor, and that will cause perhaps a structural change in the receptor, which triggers the rest of the dynamic there. Hormones, they have a role in homeostasis, so that's for maintaining stable conditions in the body. They regulate metabolism, growth, water balance, and they maintain the stability of the bodily conditions within the animals. There's different types and mechanisms of hormones, so there's some variety of them as you would have seen in that big long list of them that we had earlier on. And the peptide hormones, they act via membrane receptors, so those are the water soluble ones, and then you've got the steroid hormones that can because they're lipid soluble, they can actually travel through the cell membranes and regulate gene transcription or receptors within the cell directly. So we've talked quite a bit about what a hormone is, what the endocrine system is, but now let's try and take a step back and link it to the ecology and the adaptation to the environment of the animal, and you know, how might it improve the fitness of the animal. So why hormonal coordination is essential for survival. So survival is an important component of ecological fitness, and these hormones, they're not only involved in just survival, they're also involved in reproduction, which is the other major component of fitness. So taken together, you know, hormones, they're really important for animals to optimize their fitness, because it affects in both survival and reproduction. Looking at survival now. Adaptation to adaptive integration of environmental signals. So this hormonal coordination, it integrates internal and external changes to generate adaptive whole organism responses. So what that means is if there's something changing in the environment externally, there's the body can, with the sensory system, it can pick up various signals relating to that, and that can be linked to changes in hormone production, which will allow the animal to be correctly adapted to whatever's happening out there in the environment. Not only that, so that's more reactive, but there are also anticipatory hormonal responses. So these allow the animals to prepare in advance for predictable events. So it's like seasonal breeding through hormonal cascades, and that's very important, because it allows the animals to breed at a particular time of year, so that the young will be born not in the middle of the winter, because you want to time it with the gestation of the animal, so that the young are born when there's good environmental conditions. There'll be food available for the babies to eat. So this is something which has happened as a sort of evolutionary adaptation, and the animals they'll only be having their breeding season at an appropriate time of the year. That will mean that once they've had their gestation, the young will be born at the right time. And another clever thing, or a very adaptive thing, which the hormones allow the organism to do, is allocation trade-offs. So they can prioritize survival by managing various trade-offs. So things like balancing functions like stress response and reproduction. So it'll integrate the body will integrate various signals it's picking up, and if the environment looks very stressful and like a dangerous place, then the body will be preparing for sort of stress responses, and it won't be sort of preparing for reproduction, because it wouldn't be appropriate within that type of environment. Before you had my talk about hormones, you also had a previous talk, I think in the week before, when you were looking at nervous systems. So just the nervous system is also very important in coordination of what's happening within the body. And I'd just like to sort of compare and contrast a bit those two major systems. So we've got the nervous system characteristics that transmits rapid, short-lived, localized electrical signals for immediate responses like reflexes. Endocrine system, in contrast, that releases hormones into the bloodstream, causing slower but longer-lasting, widespread physiological effects. And we have integration between those two systems. So that happens in the hypothalamus, which is linking neural signals together with hormonal responses, and involved a bit there in coordination of reproductive functions. Just to make it completely clear, I've presented that here now as a table comparing these two major signaling systems within the body. And nervous system signal is through electrical impulses, very fast, short-lasting. It's the pathway of that is through neurons, so it's very directed. It'll go in according to where the neuron goes, and response will be more localized. For example, you might have something going on in the muscles, and then compare that with the endocrine system, the hormone system. These are chemicals rather than electrical impulses. They're slower, so they act in seconds to days, and they're longer lasting effects, and that they travel in the bloodstream, so it's more widespread. circulation of them, and they affect target organisms though. Target organs. It needs to be a cell which has a receptor for it, or otherwise it's just not going to respond to the hormone at all. So now moving on to looking at the role of hormones with two major events in life of an animal. So we've got stress events, stress responses. So this could be periods of time when the animal's in danger. So, for example, a predator comes along to attack it, and it needs to escape, or some kind of danger situation like that. So hormonal control of stress responses, and the biological definition of stress. This is any challenge threatening an animal's physiological stability or homeostasis. So it could also be a harmful physical environment. So if it's extremely hot or extremely cold, or they can also be those kind of challenges as well as being attacked by a predator. So it's situations where the chance of survival of the animal is affected, and it needs to adapt to that. There's various different types of stress. So it can be physical injury. It can be environmental scarcity as well. So limited availability of food resources. The animal needs to have enough food. If there's not enough food there, then that can be an issue. And there's social dominance challenges. So this is competition. So it's often there's rivalry between male animals, and they'll fight each other. So that's one example of competition. Predation can also be a stress. If some other animal comes along and tries to eat it, that can be another type of stress that the animal needs to adapt to. There's a difference between acute versus chronic stress. Acute stress that affects survival. So that it could mean if the interaction goes wrong, the animal dies. For example, it's eaten or something. Chronic stress, those are sort of more longer term things, and might be suboptimal conditions, so it's harming the health and impairing function. Role of hormones. Hormones, they regulate the stress response, and they're involved in the body adapting to that stress and preparing with the right sort of response to it. And if we have sort of immediate danger situations that could affect survival, then we've got this fight or flight response. And with this, it's an immediate short-term response to an acute threat. It's not chronic, this one is acute, so it's something which might affect the survival. It's primarily driven by the sympathetic medullary SAM axis. And the key hormones in that are adrenaline and noradrenaline. It's a fast response. It's complementary to the glucocorticoid mediated responses, which are a bit slower. And what happens when you have this fight or flight response? So a danger situation, and you prepare to run away or fight hard. And so it's increasing the heart rates, increasing the blood pressure, increasing ventilation, so the body is capable of the various physical exertions that it will need to do. It redistributes the blood flow to the skeletal muscle. So this is the muscles will need to have the oxygen there, and everything it needs to function as well as it can. And there's temporary suppression of digestion, growth, and reproduction during those times. And so these type of flight or fight reactions, they're sort of changing the way that the body is. So there'll be things like instead of just having easy breathing, you have deep, heavy breathing. There's more movement of the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, so it's getting more oxygen, getting ready for all of this. That's what danger and what response it needs to either run away or fight. And it has more sort of protected postures and movement patterns rather than just being sort of chilling out, relaxing. Have more decreased awareness of movement patterns and more sort of alert and switched on for looking at whatever it is that's going to attack you. More rigid posture, less control of movement of the breath. So it's just getting, you know, not sort of sitting pretty. It's getting ready to fight or run. And sometimes they can, you know, with modern life, there can actually be sort of stressful situations which we encounter, and they will sort of trigger these type of responses. And it's sort of very old thing that's developed in evolutionary history that when there's a threat, it meant that we needed to run away or fight. And now in modern life, sometimes you know, you're not actually going to do that physical exertion, but still, because there's something which is challenging that's happening, it's sort of still triggering those sort of ancient responses, and so this can actually cause other sort of stress responses in people, and they're going to often be feeling uncomfortable when they're having this type of thing being switched on. And this is why actually doing exercise can actually help a great deal to relieve stress, because then you actually get that physical movement, which is what the sort of the ancient adaptation, that it's sort of getting ready to do something like that. And if you do some of those things, then it can actually sort of allow the body to vent with the things that it might be expecting in a more sort of primitive type of situation. Now we've got the HPA and HPI axes in invertebrates, and so these are hormonal cascade initiations, and so this is a bit similar, preparing the body for a challenging time, but it's not quite as immediate as the adrenaline responses. And so the hypothalamus, it releases corticotropin releasing hormone, CRH, which is sometimes called corticotropin releasing factor, same thing, and that goes to the anterior pituitary, and it triggers the ACTH secretion from the pituitary gland, and that ACTH stimulates adrenal glands to produce glucocorticoids like cortisol, mediating a stress response. So this another stress adaptation. Elevated glucocorticoid levels, they inhibit CRH and ACTH release and prevent overstimulation of the axis. So there's a sort of negative feedback to prevent it from being too overwhelmed by it all. And we have conservation of this across vertebrates. So this this type of signaling gets conserved across a large range of different vertebrates. Excuse me, got a bit of a dry throat. Just need to drink a little bit. And there's variations that reflecting ecological adaptations. So you might get slightly varied in different organisms. Physiological and behavioural effects of glucocorticoids. So this again is part of the stress response. It increases glucose and fatty acid availability, so allowing energy to be available to the body so it can do the things that it needs to do. Yeah, it promotes liver gluconeogenesis, reducing energy storage, so it's mobilizing sugar reserves, energy reserves. It has immune function modulation, so it suppresses inflammatory responses. It's beneficial short term because it's prioritizing the sort of immediate things the body needs to do. But it's harmful if chronically elevated, because if it's suppressing the immune system, then the body will actually be more susceptible to infections. It has brain and behavior effects. So glucocorticoids, they impact cognition, mood, learning, memory, and alter behaviors like foraging and social interactions. And there's also context-dependent effects. So baseline glucocorticoids, they support normal function. Acute rises are adaptive. Chronic elevation, though, can lead to health issues. So now let's consider acute versus chronic stress, costs and benefits. Acute stress, that triggers short-lived hormone surges that enhance survival and focus attention on immediate threat, so that's beneficial to the organism. But chronic stress, that causes prolonged hormone elevation, leading to energy depletion, immune suppression, and physiological disruption. So that could actually be harmful if the stress is sort of activated even when the danger isn't there. And we have physiological trade-offs. So there's stress hormones that mediate trade-offs, so diverting energy from growth and reproduction to immediate survival needs, as you will have seen. Which now brings us back to reproduction. So if the animal isn't in a dangerous situation, it needs to, for long-term fitness, it needs to produce the next generation. So we have hormones involved in reproductive systems too. And there's another axis here. There's the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. So this HPG for short. This regulates reproduction through a hierarchical hormonal system involving a number of different hormones: GnRH, LH, luteinizing hormone, and FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. So hormonal regulation of your reproduction. There's feedback mechanisms in this as well. So there's sex steroids like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. These modulate hormone release via feedback control. And in a lot of animals, there's environmental sensitivity with this. So it adjusts the reproductive effort based on not only in internal conditions, but also external environmental cues. So there might be a particular breeding season that an animal has got. There's regulation of reproductive functions with these hormones. So sex steroids, they regulate gamete production and coordinate ovarian cycles and pregnancy in reproductive physiology. They also influence secondary sexual characteristics, so things like body size, the pitch of the voice, size of different body parts, mate attraction, and competition. There's behavioural effects. So sex steroids, they can affect courtship, aggression, and parental care behaviours, influencing reproductive strategies. And they have broader physiological roles. So sex steroids, they also modulate metabolic and immune systems, and they're balancing the reproductive demands with other physiological demands of the body. So let's look in a little bit more detail now about this coordination with the environment and using environmental cues for seasonal reproduction. So the animals, they can use photoperiod, the day length, as a reproductive cue. So that gives a reliable cue for detecting by the nervous system, allowing them to regulate their reproductive periods. The reason for this is to avoid the young being born at the wrong time of the year when there aren't resources available for them. And so you get things like the deer. They'll have a rutting season, a mating season in September, October, which means that after they've had the gestation period, then the female deer, they'll be giving birth to the baby deers sometime when the weather conditions are nice in April and May, rather than if they had their mating season earlier in the year, then the young might be born in the middle of winter, which would be really bad news for the survival of the and life chances for the young. There's as well as day length, there's melatonin, so that can convey also the information about like how sunny and the conditions are. So that can also provide information to the systems controlling these hormone release to activate or inhibit reproduction. So melatonin levels. Other environmental influences that can affect it: temperature, food availability, social signals. Those can also affect reproductive hormones and the timing of breeding. I've already said this about the seasonal breeding adaptation. So it means that the young are born at the time of when there's abundant resources, and this hormonal control anticipates those environmental conditions. It's very clever, actually. Now, finally, so we're really done with integration of stress and reproduction. So these two sort of pulling the animal perhaps in different directions, and but it needs to be integrated according to the conditions. So we do get this sort of trade-off, and the stress axis that will suppress reproduction. Activation of the stress axis, that type of hormone release, that's going to happen through the glucocorticoids, and it affects the HPG axis, which is the hormones which are allowing for example, the production of sperm, or the fertility of the ovaries and things like this. So adaptive resource allocation during acute stress, the resources shift from reproduction to survival, supporting immediate stress needs over reproduction. But with chronic stress, that can lead to extended reproductive suppression, potentially leading to reduced overall fitness and reproductive success, because the animal doesn't just need to survive; it needs to reproduce as well. So this is actually really bad news if the stress responses are activated for such a prolonged time that it can't reproduce. Then that's going to be pretty bad news for the animal, and it needs to be context dependent hormonal coordination, and just have the appropriate thing for the appropriate time. Excuse me. And for a couple of final points, there's feedback plasticity and life history context within these hormonal responses. So we have feedback loops. There's the negative feedback that stabilizes hormone levels, prevents excessive release, and balances the stress and reproductive functions. We've got plasticity across life stages. So this allows physiological adjustment during growth, reproduction, and aging to meet the environmental demands of the different life stages. And ecological and evolutionary impact. This influences the animal survival and reproduction, allowing adaptation to environmental changes. So some of these things, they're like ancient responses that are a result of evolutionary history over millions of years of how the animals have adapted to the environment and the ecological conditions. And we have endocrine integration framework. So by understanding the feedback and integration with molecular hormone actions, that can influence the performance and behaviour of the individual. So it'll integrate all these various different things together and allow it to adapt to the environment, so it can be doing the right thing at the right time. Okay, so that's it for now, folks. Thanks very much for listening. Well done for again listening to the whole lecture. Well done, and I look forward to discussing with you at this tutorial. We remember that the learning outcomes for this session: understand how the hormones are regulating animal responses, be aware of the different kinds of hormones. So we've had quite a tour of different hormones. Familiarise how the hormones are involved in stress responses. We've done that. And consider how reproduction is regulated by hormones. We've done that too. So thanks very much for listening. Look forward to seeing you at the tutorial. Thanks.